Welcome to the Steelers Breakdown podcast from PennLive, featuring PennLive's Steelers beat reporter Nick Farabaugh, who's been out sweating in the Latrobe sun, covering Steelers training camp exhaustively, day in and day out in these dog days of August. But, if you've missed some of Nick's day-to-day reporting and podcast and tweeting, you get a blow-by-blow account of what's happening in training camp. But as we convene today, 2 weeks in on the eve of the Steelers' first preseason matchup with the Texans, I really want to get from Nick and for you, the viewer, the key storylines that are emerging out of training camp that will actually carry over into the regular season and have an impact on what these 2024 Steelers do when the footballs start flying for real. So Nick, if you can kind of just give us this sort of story to date of where we are with the quarterbacks, with the offense, with how this team is going to look come the regular season. What can you give us? What kind of preview based on what you've seen can you give us?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, the tackle situation is going to be the big one, man. I mean, tackle and quarterback, like those are the two ones, right? So, John, today was the first day Russell Wilson did full 11 on 11. So this was finally the day you got to see Russell Wilson, go toe-to-toe with Justin Fields. It was the first time we had seen that all of training camp. They kind of swung back and forth. Russ took 2 reps. Justin took 2 reps. And then tackle, I mean, that was the other big one. Troy Fautanu, for the first time, took every single right tackle first team rep. So the first round rookie is moving on up in the world, it would seem. And then you also look at Broderick Jones and Dan Moore, and they were doing the same thing that Fields and Wilson were doing, taking 2 reps each, working for the first and the second team. So they're splitting it there. So that's something to watch to me right away in the first preseason game. That's going to be a storyline going up through the regular season, obviously. Whoever we see there, those are going to be 2 big storylines. I think the other big one is center. Nate Herbig against Zach Frazier is another key one. These rookies on the offensive line, right? These are so important because we've been talking about the offensive line improvement, and it's almost all been hinging on Fautanu and Frazier. And so this is something absolutely you need to watch. Zach Frazier right now has not taken a first-team rep yet, John. I mean, he has not taken one yet. And so while Troy Fautanu and Peyton Wilson even are getting significant reps, Zach Frazier is not. But he's playing well. He had his best day, in my opinion, of training camp today. And so those are the 3 big storylines. The other big one I think that we're going to see is how does Arthur Smith's offense evolve? What are we going to see? Are we going to see changes from what he did in Atlanta? We know we're going to get motion, play action, run heavy. You're going to get a lot of the middle of the field. But what about, stuff the Steelers did last year, like gap concepts with pulling guards and tackles, even the centers? We saw a little bit of that today. So I'm interested in those certain storylines moving forward.
Let me ask you about Frazier because I recall, we had another experiment with a rookie center by the name of Kendrick Green, who blew up in the Steelers' face and it blew up in Ben Roethlisberger's face and really tainted the twilight of his career with his poor play. Are they gun shy about putting a rookie at center, and is that a factor with Frazier?
I'm not sure it's gun shy. I think with rookies in particular, they just don't want to hurt the development of their rookies. Like even last year, Keanu Benton, Joey Porter Jr., Broderick Jones all did not truly start week 1. Keanu Benton played the most out of those guys, but they found small roles. Like Joey Porter Jr. would come on in nickel and dime, right? He would come on as the extra DB. Peyton Wilson, for example, this year is going to be on in dime linebacker roles. So it's small ways to get them on. But at offensive line, John, there's no way to do that, right? You could do that at corner or wide receiver or linebacker or running back or defensive line. You can't do that at center and offensive tackle. And so I think what the Steelers are kind of waiting for is they want that green light. Like they want to see, is this guy ready? Or is the guy playing in front of them so bad that they need to put that guy in? Sometimes that happens. I think, with Kendrick Green, they just didn't have another option. And so they didn't give him much competition. He kind of walked in there. I think the Steelers realized that was a problem and that was an issue. And we saw what happened there. And I think there's a lot of factors to go into the Kendrick Green pick. I don't even think he was truly a natural center. I think he was more of a natural guard. And we saw Houston switch him right back to guard right when they traded for him, because I think that's where he's naturally more comfortable. But I think when you look at Zach Frazier, it's going to be about, okay, can this guy show you what he needs to start week one? What's that going to be? Does he know all the calls? Does he handle power well? Are his snaps well? Does the routine look routine? I think that's something that really goes undervalued. It's not the advanced stuff. It's, does the routine look routine? Like with Troy Fautanu, to me, he's got advanced work in his kind of resume, and you also see the routine. It's just routine for him. It's easy. For Zach Frazier, I thought for the first 2 weeks things weren't easy for him. I think he's starting to get it though, and so I think he needs to check those boxes off. I don't think they're gun shy about starting a rookie center. Otherwise, I don't think they would have taken Zach Frazier, because I think they expect him to play at some point this season. But what I do think is they need to check off these boxes, because offensive line is such an important position. And again, you don't rotate offensive line.
I agree. And having, I don't know about the Steelers, but I'm still gun shy, having gone and watched Kendrick Green step in. And at the time when he was drafted and was coming into playing camp, there were whispers about, oh, he's a sort of a Marquise Pouncey clone. Well, he wasn't. And it was terrible. But we move on and we hope for the best for Frazier, that he comes into his own in his time, so that we don't have, like you said, the rookie being mentally damaged by being in over his head. Now, you talked about Russell Wilson and the fact that today was his first 11 on 11 work throughout, a full practice. How much is he behind in this training camp, or has he fallen behind due to that tweak of the calf? And in your words, in one of your dispatches from Latrobe, you talked about this opening the door for Justin Fields and almost making it an even up competition from here forward. Is that where we are, and how is this going to unfold?
It's going to be about who I think plays better. But I always have thought, John, Russell Wilson had to lose the job. And what I mean by that is, I think, while Justin Fields had to be impressive too, I think Russell Wilson had to not play well, had to definitely bring up cause for concern, because I think his pedigree, his resume, and what he has done in the NFL are extremely valued by Mike Tomlin. I think Mike Tomlin values resume. He values winners. He values natural born leaders. I think these are things that describe Russell Wilson very well. And so I think that is where this kind of comes into play. Here's the one way to lose it, though. You are not on the field for the first 10 practices of training camp. That is one way to lose it if you're not out there. However, I don't think Russell Wilson has lost the job. What I do think it has given the Steelers an option to do, though, is they have seen Justin Fields over 2 weeks of what he can do, how he can build chemistry up with a certain wide receiver, because him and George Pickens right now are just humming. I mean, these guys are connecting 4 or 5 times a practice. That's a lot. I think over the last 4 days, they have hooked up for like 22 receptions, I think I've charted. That's a lot. And so, that's something you see. You see the growth of the guy. And I think Justin Fields has gotten more confident. He's got more comfortable. And so the door creaks open a little more. I still think, if you ask me right now who would start week one, I would still say I expect Russell Wilson to. But I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't think the door was a little bit more open than it was when I came here 2 weeks ago. I just think it is. I think Justin Fields put up a great week last week of football, and I think he opened some eyes here in the Steelers organization of what he can do.
Interesting. Now, we have the first preseason game coming up on Friday with the Texans. There have been people, NFL gurus or whoever, saying that really the first few weeks of the regular season have become the new preseason because so few teams play as a starting unit. Are we going to see either of these quarterbacks in the preseason game on Friday? And how much of this offense are we going to see?
Well, here's the thing. The Texans did announce yesterday they are going to start their starters. And so I would imagine we do see both of these quarterbacks. As long as Russell Wilson's calf is good to go, I expect to see both these guys. We're definitely going to see Justin Fields, and I think you have to. I think we'll see them both for the first two preseason games. I think we'll see them both against the Houston Texans and the Buffalo Bills. And so I really think that's the way to go about this is let's see how this translates to games, right? We've seen Justin Fields in practice, but if you really want to see how good his legs are, how natural he is with his legs, how it works in the pocket with both these guys, man, you better have them both work in games because pocket management is so important for both these guys. So I think we'll see both of them. As for how long, so D'Amico Ryans, the Texans head coach, said he believes his starters will play about 2 series. If that's true for the defense, I'd give 1 series to Russell Wilson and I'd give 1 to Justin Fields. That's what I would do. Make this a true quarterback competition. Let's see who rises to the occasion in a game. And then I think even after that, even when you get to the 2s, I think you still need to see these guys play because you need as much game tape as possible because you only get so much. You only get so much game tape, and in practice, you can't touch quarterbacks. So I think we need to see as much game tape as possible, and I think that's where it's going to be made, man. In these environments, I think they both could play all 3 preseason games. Would not surprise me at all.
And given what you've seen in training camp thus far, who are the players you most want to look at in a game, simulated game action or game action, whatever you call the preseason these days?
Well, I definitely want to see the rookie O lineman. I think that's a key one, right? Because even with pads on, sometimes, John, it can be a little tough to kind of break down offensive linemen in practice. Now, you can see certain traits, but you can't see everything. And so I want to see Troy Fautanu, Mason McCormick, Zach Frazier. How do they look? But another guy I really want to see is on the offense is Van Jefferson. Um, you know, John, we'll get to the Brandon Aiyuk stuff. I'm sure of it. But right now, with what they have, George Pickens is the clear 1. Van Jefferson is the 2. I mean, he's separating himself from the pack. But I want to see it in game. I want to see where it goes. I also want to see Calvin Austin in game. He's had a nice spring and summer. I want to see does what he has done so far, does it translate to the field? I want to see him on defense. I want to see some guys like Keanu Benton, for example. I want to see his second-year leap. But the guy I'm really looking forward to seeing is Beanie Bishop. I just want to see Beanie Bishop in the slot. Unprecedented, John, in terms of what he is getting for a first-teamer. He is an undrafted free agent that signed a contract in May. They signed him to a contract in May as an undrafted free agent, and he's already getting first-team reps. I don't remember that ever happening right out of the gate, and he's done very well. But let's see it in the game. Let's see how he plays with the physicality when the pads are real. And so I think these are some guys that I really want to see. Also, just for curiosity's sake, I want to see Cameron Johnston. I want to see the punting. Let's see how the punting goes. I think that's another thing that I'm really looking forward to seeing.
And what about Peyton Wilson? I keep hearing the buzz around him. That he did have that ankle or the knee thing, but that we might have gotten a steal there at linebacker with Peyton Wilson. What's the story on him so far?
Yeah, I think Peyton Wilson will end up playing, as I said, in that dime linebacker spot. I expect Patrick Queen and Elandon Roberts to be the starting linebackers. It doesn't sound like Cole Holcomb is going to be ready for week 1, John. I think that's something that has kind of arisen recently and has become far clearer over time, is that it doesn't look like he's going to be ready to play. And the reason is, if you look at what they did last week, they restructured his contract to make it a split contract. What that means is he is guaranteed $3.1 million base salary if he is out for the year on the PUP list. But he was scheduled to get $6 million. So he's going to have to play to get that $6 million. So getting that split contract doesn't signal that they expect him to be ready. And so Peyton Wilson, I think, has a really nice gig here to crack in dime packages, nickel packages, coverage situations where maybe Elandon Roberts isn't the strongest there. And so that's where I think you're going to see Peyton Wilson. He's going to play. I think he's going to play early. I'm not saying he's going to play a ton, but it could definitely happen where over the season he gains more and more snaps because he is a talented player. But, John, I will say I think he's still kind of figuring out the NFL, the physicality of it all. So I think there's ups and downs to Peyton Wilson's game that I've seen out here that really he's in the right role, mitigating his snaps right now. I think he's in the right role to slow things down and let him acclimate to the NFL.
Well, you guessed it. We have reached the point in the podcast where we're going to dive in and talk about Brandon Aiyuk. I hear that the 49ers, true to their name, are gold digging when it comes to draft picks of any potential trade. So is it fool's gold for Steelers fans to even hope and dream for Brandon Aiyuk to come to Pittsburgh and wear the black and gold?
I don't think it's fool's gold, John. I think it's realistic. And let's break down all the angles of this, John, because this is a messy situation for San Francisco and Aiyuk himself. So, first of all, there's two parts to any trade that must happen here. Essentially, Brandon Aiyuk has a no trade clause. It's not actually in his contract, it's an unofficial no trade clause. But since he's on an expiring contract with 1 year left on his deal, if he doesn't want to go to a place, he's not going to a place. And so, obviously, if let's say the Browns and the Patriots have been the two teams really connected with him, along with the Steelers in recent days, let's say he doesn't want to go to Cleveland or New England, which I'm hearing he doesn't, then he doesn't have to, even if the 49ers like the packages that Cleveland and New England are offering. But the second part is you still have to meet San Francisco's asking price. So there's two parts to this. You have to meet not only the 49ers' demands, you also have to meet Brandon Ayuk's demands. Now, the Steelers will meet Brandon Ayuk's demands. It's if they meet the Niners' demands. And what I think they're looking for right now is you talked about draft picks. I think they want a player. I think that's what they want, John. I think they want a player here. They are in a Super Bowl window. They only have so much time left. Brock Purdy is going to get a massive deal next offseason. And so they only have so much time. So if they're going to trade who I think personally is their best wide receiver, well, they want something in return. And that could be a number of things. The reported offers right now with the Browns, might have Amari Cooper going back. With the Patriots, it's Kendrick Bourne plus picks. So it's a player plus a pick or multiple picks. For the Steelers, obviously, you cannot match a wide receiver trade. They do not have the wide receivers to trade. So it won't be a wide receiver. But could it be someone else? Could it be, I don't know, James Daniels? Could that be a trade where you maybe trade the guard? You just drafted Mason McCormick. You have Nate Herbig. You have Spencer Anderson. You have some guys that have gotten a lot of first team reps and are kind of getting in there right now. Could that be a look? It could be something you look at. I don't think they're going to trade, a huge name. For example, I don't think they're going to trade someone, of Amari Cooper's name value. So I don't expect someone like, let's say, the 49ers could use edge rusher depth. I do not expect them to trade Alex Highsmith. I don't expect that to happen.
Right.
But I would say, something like, let's say James Daniels in a second round pick. That might be something that could happen. But either way, you have to meet both of these criteria. You have to satisfy what the Niners want, and you have to satisfy Brandon Aiyuk. It sounds like right now Brandon Aiyuk wants to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, and the trade package just ain't good enough right now. And I think the 49ers have enough leverage to still keep Brandon Aiyuk. Is Brandon Aiyuk going to sit out games in order to get what he wants? If I were the 49ers, I might call that bluff if I don't like the contract talks that I'm going with, right? I might do that if I don't like the trade offer from Pittsburgh. So Aiyuk does get the force where he goes. He holds a lot of leverage. But I also think the 49ers hold leverage in that unless Brandon Aiyuk's willing to miss games, and maybe he is, then we can revisit that. But I think the 49ers hold leverage where they don't have to necessarily deal him either. But it seems like they're quite open to it. So, man, there's so many angles to it. But I think the Steelers, to answer your question, basically, the Steelers are right in the thick of this. I don't think it's a pipe dream whatsoever.
It is one reason that the 2025 Steelers first round pick off the table because they could be looking for a quarterback again in 2025. Is that one reason why the first round pick would be off the table in a Brandon Aiyuk deal with Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I don't think you can rule that out as being part of it. I think you have to have considerations in what that first round pick could be. That first round pick could be the wide receiver that they would pick if they don't get Aiyuk. It could be a quarterback, but John, looking right now, the 2025 quarterback class does not look that great. And so I'm sure the Steelers have their own opinions already on the 25 quarterback class. And so it's not really necessarily considered a very strong quarterback group amongst NFL evaluators. And so I'm not sure that's part of it. I'm interested to see if the Steelers would be willing to part with that first. I think, quarterback is part of that because quarterbacks can come out of nowhere sometimes. For example, Jaden Daniels had really ascended up the board all this year to become a first round pick, the second overall pick, in fact. And so he really ascended very quickly. But it's not really regarded as a highly regarded quarterback class. So I don't really think that's part of it. I just think the Steelers are a team that has always built through the draft. And so naturally, they value first round picks a lot. But we remember the last time they had a first round pick that they traded, right? I mean, they traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick. So if they're going to trade for if they're going to trade a first round pick, they better be sure of it. The value better be there. I think, if you trade the first round pick, if I were the Steelers, well then I don't want to part with the player. That's what I would personally want to say. So I think there's a lot of factors to break down there, but that first round pick for the Steelers could be so many different things. It could be a quarterback, but right now, John, that quarterback class is not exactly popping.
Right. And even with Minka, in parting with that first round pick, if I have my drafts correct, there are some who still second guess that because the Steelers might have lost their shot at Justin Herbert. That they would have been maybe had the firing power from whatever that pick would have been to go up and get a Justin Herbert and have the transition locked in from Big Ben to that guy. It's always coulda, woulda, shoulda, but there are people that even with Minka, that they second guess parting with a first rounder in trade. Just to go back to Van Jefferson one more time, because if the Aiyuk deal doesn't work out, as you said, he's looking to be the number two. For the Steelers fans just getting acquainted with some of the new names on the roster, give a thumbnail bio of Van and where he's coming from, what he's done, and could he be a legitimate number two?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, listen, the profile doesn't suggest a wide receiver two. It suggests a wide receiver three, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. But here's the background on him. He's the son of a wide receivers coach, Sean Jefferson, and he's still in the NFL coaching wide receivers. So he was around ball his whole life. So he's a football lifer, came out of the University of Florida, didn't test super well, doesn't really play as an elite athlete, but he's a savvy player. He's a really good route runner. He's got good releases off the line. The one thing that has really plagued him was drops. And that was something that really kind of came up throughout his tape and profile. He had a really significant drop rate. But what actually he's doing at training camp right now, John, is Antonio Brown, when he was here, used to catch 300 balls every day off the machines after practice. Van Jefferson does it every single day, catches 300 balls after practice. You can imagine how many that is after 15 practices here in Latrobe. That's a lot of footballs he caught. So, by the time he does that, and he's going to do it not only, at training camp, but throughout the season, I mean, he's going to catch well over, I think, 4,000 balls just by doing that here in training camp. I think it's 4,500 balls specifically. And then you'd put that over a whole season. I mean, that's tens of thousands of footballs that you will catch. So that's alone is something to commend with Van Jefferson. He is a guy that is putting in the work and showcasing it. He's developing a connection. He's a high character player. He blocks his behind off. I think that's part of what really makes the Steelers like him a lot. And so Van Jefferson is sticking out. Again, I don't really think he's necessarily a wide receiver two. He's playing like a really solid three right now. But I think he separated himself from the pack, and he's a guy that can win deep and downfield. And if he's got really sure hands now because he's catching all these balls after practice and improving that, I think that's a step in the right direction. So I think he's done a nice job. And I think Calvin Austin's the other guy that's kind of done a nice job. And so if let's say this Aiyuk stuff doesn't happen, I think you're top three right now, John, would be George Pickens, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, and then let's see where Roman Wilson kind of factors into that when he gets back from his ankle injury.
And I'll tell you one thing: if Van is emulating Antonio Brown's work ethic, that is something truly to be emulated because he did work himself from obscurity into what I think is the best receiver the Steelers ever had, and he had a 6-year run with Ben Roethlisberger, where if you look at the stats, I don't know who's going to match that. Not only with the black and gold, but with the NFL, he had a run. And of course, we know, it kind of went to his head in the end, and he kind of became a diva's diva. But these days in retirement, I'll give you a tip. He's a great follow on Twitter, and his memes are outstanding. And surprisingly, he's a Trump supporter. So I don't know where that came from, but Antonio AB is still being AB, unconventional in all ways, except when it came to catching the football for the Steelers and working himself into the star that he became through sheer tenacity. So there is that to be said. As we move through training camp and we start getting into the preseason, how does the tone of training camp change? Because obviously you have to leave some gas in the tank of these players, for these preseason games. So how does the tempo change as we enter the exhibition season?
Yeah, I mean, you start to see some game planning specific stuff. It starts to become like a mock kind of week, essentially, trying to get these guys up to what it's going to be like in a normal week in an NFL locker room, which is kind of how things change. It changes a little bit at some point, John, from evaluation and more towards let's get these guys into specific game specific spots, make it football like as much as we can, and then you evaluate them in these different spots. So it's kind of tailoring things. At the beginning, it's very general. Now you're running things like 2-minute drill, goal line, short yardage, third down. So you're running more specific things because these guys should have better grasp of the playbook. You kind of know what your depth chart looks like to a degree. So all of this kind of breaks it down. And that's really where you start to see things happen. And so throughout the first 10 practices, you saw how guys performed. So this is why, for example, Troy Fautanu, who performed extremely well throughout the first 10 practices, is now getting first-team reps. So it's just changes like that you start to see. And then you put that to the test in specific areas, right? Specific runs that you want to do. And so that's how training camp changes over time. Everything becomes a little bit more specific into football environments, game-like environments, to try and evaluate these guys on a broad spectrum.
One last tidbit before we close out. Given all the talk about the offensive line, Arthur Smith, we haven't talked about the two running backs, Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. Give us a preview what we may see as far as new wrinkles in the running game under this new offensive coordinator that we might see in Houston on Friday.
Yeah, man. I when I look at what we might see, I think we're going to see a lot of the bread and butter of Arthur Smith, which is wide zone, outside zone, duo, inside zone, simple things like that. I think you're going to see a lot of pistol. I think you're going to see a lot of shotgun. I think you'll see under center stuff too. But I think with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson specifically, I think a lot of the pistol stuff really works. One, it allows them to run a quarterback run game a lot more seamlessly out of those formations. Two, with Russell Wilson specifically, it allows them to see the field a lot better. So I think there's a lot of different advantages to that. I think in the run game, I think you'll see less gap stuff than you saw last year. It's not really Arthur Smith's thing, but I think that could also be one of the big changes he makes. I think that could be one of the big wrinkles we're talking about, John. So when you get Broderick Jones in space, pulling on the move or on screens, good things happen. Same thing with Troy Fautanu. It's a very athletic line, very good pulling line. And so I think that's something we're going to see with Arthur Smith's run game, the wrinkles we're going to see. And so multiple tight ends, we have talked about this. You're going to see Freiermuth and Darnell Washington and Michael Pruitt and Connor Hayward and Jack Coletto, the fullback, right? You're going to see all these different things on the field, very multiple personnel. You're going to see 22. You're going to see a lot of 12, 13. You're going to condense that formation. Then you're going to go to empty and spread it out. That's a lot of different stuff that Arthur Smith does. So he's very multiple personnel, and he's very much in that zone run scheme that you see. But I do think there's going to be some wrinkles into some more gap stuff just because the line calls for it.
Well, there you have it. Steelers Nation turns its eyes to its favorite football team for the first time in nearly 8 months in game action. And we got two shiny new quarterbacks. We got beef on the offensive line, and we got new wrinkles under the new coordinator in the running game and the passing offense. A lot to take in and a lot to go over next week at this time on Tuesday at your Steelers Breakdown podcast with PennLive beat reporter Nick Farbaugh. For John Lucy, until next time, let's go Steelers.